Hey guys, this is Jen with Iris Ministries. And in this video, I am going to really just kind of do a recap on what God is doing right now in my crazy faith journey. Um, some of you may have seen my previous video about how I traveled across the country more than 1,000 miles each way to go to Transformation Church back in February, and I went on 83 cents, 15 miles in my gas tank, and a word from God. So little did I know when I did that back in February that that was actually going to be a practice round or training, you could say, for what was really happening now, um, which is basically the same concept, but like on steroids, like times 100, because now it relates not just to a trip, but to my whole life, to my daily life. So I did a little short recap on my Instagram story, I want to say 2 days ago. But as usual, there was just way too much to share. So I wanted to go ahead and do this video because I really, really, really feel like I'm supposed to share this as it's happening, sort of take you along with me on the ride, because I'm just a normal person, just like you. I'm not some like high and mighty person who like has all these degrees and all this theology background. I'm a normal person who is just walking a pretty incredible journey with God, and I can say that because it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with Him. So I feel like I'm just going to kind of go where the Holy Spirit wants me to go with this and share what I feel led to share. I do have some notes here just with what I feel like was important, but I will go ahead and just share this stuff first about the crazy faith journey and what he's been doing. In case that's all you want to hear, then you can just watch that and then you can just stop. But I actually have some other really good things that he's been teaching me and speaking to me about in the midst of what's happening. And I feel like I'm supposed to share that too. So anyway, I'm just going to dive right in. If you did not see my Instagram story the other day, basically what happened is that, of course, as everybody knows, we are in this crazy situation right now with all this virus stuff going on, and everybody is sort of in lockdown mode. Everybody's isolating themselves and not going out anywhere and not doing anything. And if you have read any of the prophetic words that I've released, or even probably even seen any of my social media posts, you probably already know this, but if you don't, the Lord has been speaking to me loud and clear through the prophetic words that he had me release corporately to the whole church, but also just personally, him speaking to me. And he's told me from the very, very beginning that I was not to live my life any differently, that I was just supposed to just keep living normally. And if that sounds weird to you, now again, this is only going to make sense if you are in any kind of relationship with God. It might still sound even a little confusing, even if you know God, even if you are a believer and you are a Jesus follower. But certainly if you don't know Jesus, this is the part where you're just going to have to think I sound crazy, but bear with me. And I hope you'll also listen to what I have to say, because it'll be an encouragement to you too. So if that sounds crazy to you, if we stop for a minute though and think about it, we are made to be set apart. So again, I go way more in depth in this in the posts. I'll put the links down below, but basically we are made to be set apart. We are made to be the light of the world. We are made to be a city on a hill. We are not supposed to put our light beneath a cover and cover it up. We're supposed to shine. We're supposed to be walking differently than the world. First of all, because we're in the world, but we're not of the world. So we are set apart. We are different. So we're supposed to be walking differently than the world so that we can demonstrate the peace and the joy and the hope and the love that we have in Christ. So it only makes sense that we would actually be acting differently right now, that we would be standing out, because that is what is supposed to be the catalyst for people that are in the world that don't know him to come to us and say, wait a minute, why are you so peaceful? Like, why are you so calm? Why are you not freaked out? Why are you not running around in panic? Why are you not hiding? Why are you not scared? And then we can, of course, share the gospel with them and explain that, like, hey, Jesus is the answer to all of that, like not even figuratively or in like a flowery kind of way, but like he literally is the answer, because we literally are covered by the blood of Jesus, and we are protected from things like this, and we can have peace and have hope in that. So anyway, he had told me from the very beginning to just live my life normally, not do anything different. So that's what I was doing. Of course, there are certain things that even within that I can't really do anything about. If a store is closed, I can't make it open. And, I do pet sitting, and if those people are now home from work and they don't need me, I can't do anything about that. But outside of that, like just lived like I normally would. So if I would normally take the dogs on a hike, go take them on a hike. If I would normally go to Target, go to Target. If I would normally go to the grocery store, go to the grocery store. And again, I kind of get more into that in the blog post. So I'm not going to go too far into that. But anyway, that's what he was having me do. And that was going fine. But again, if you know my background, you might know that I have been on a crazy, crazy journey with the Lord since May of 2017. When my wilderness season started, and he basically told me, you're going to have to trust me now. You're just going to have to let me lead you. And he took away my permanent home and proceeded to take away a lot of other things after that. And the whole process of, pruning me and healing me and stripping me down and preparing me for what he was calling me to do. So I have not really had a permanent home since May of 2017. And I've just been like a nomad since then. I have stayed different places for like short periods of time, like 3 months or 6 months. I think probably the longest I was somewhere was 9 months. And, I've been in lots of different situations, but they've all just been, wherever God leads me to go. And I've been able to see like in each situation why I was there. And it's been an amazing journey. So the last like 4 or 5 months, basically since November, I was staying with some family members. And, that was even fine when all this was going on. But just within like the last week, they decided to really lock down. They decided to just stop going out of the house. And again, this is nothing against them, because that's what most people are doing, right? That's what most people in the world are doing. But the problem was that I'm living there, so I was now going to be required to do the same because I was living under their roof. So I was going to have to stop going out. I was going to have to stop living my normal life. And so I knew in that moment that I had a choice to make. And this is the part where it gets like, the rubber meets the road, basically, because we can say one thing, but if we don't actually do it, then like what we say doesn't really mean anything. So I knew in that moment, like I can't be right, basically, not practicing what I preach. So if I know that I'm not supposed to change the way I'm living, and I'm not supposed to bow is the word that the Holy Spirit kept using with me. And again, you'll see that throughout my posts, because he was relating it to Daniel in the lion's den, when the law said that you weren't supposed to pray, and Daniel went right home and prayed anyway. He related it to the 3 Hebrew boys that were supposed to bow down to the king's statue, and they wouldn't. They refused, and then they went into the furnace. And so these are lovely stories that he's using to compare. But, that's what he was saying. Basically, are you going to bow? Are you going to bow to fear? Are you going to bow to man's rules? Or are you going to trust me? And, again, there's more in my other words about, more specifically about like not bowing to man's rules, about all of these false security measures that aren't actually security. They're things that are supposed to make people feel safe and feel secure, but they're actually not. Would I bow to that, or would I trust him? So I told my relatives that I was going to voluntarily leave. They certainly did not make me leave. They were great. They didn't want me to leave. But I just knew I had to. So as soon as I got clarity on that, I packed up quickly and left within about 24 hours. And right before I left, God gave me some really good clarity as far as an analogy. And again, if you've been following any of my social media posts or even one of my other words I did, he was speaking a lot through the stories of Jericho and the Israelites leaving Egypt in Exodus, those two stories. And so this was at the point where I basically was like the Israelites coming out of Egypt. I was coming out of slavery. I had been freed from slavery. So I had been freed from fear, freed from anxiety. And again, that's like a whole separate thing that I could do a whole separate video about, but just, quickly to just say that I used to be just like crippled by anxiety and fear. And I mean, to the point where when I was in my early 20s, I didn't even want to leave my house. I couldn't even go anywhere and do anything. I was constantly worried, constantly afraid, constantly anxious. Panic attacks, been on back in my 20s, was on like several different medicines and just a whole crazy lot of stuff. And he has completely freed me from that. So when this came up, when this virus stuff happened, like this is normally something that would have in the past completely debilitated me. And when I say I had zero fear about this, I mean like zero. I didn't even have to like fight against it or intentionally try to not be afraid. Like I just wasn't. And so that I'm telling you that again, not as any kind of judgmental statement. I'm telling you that as a testimony of like, look what he did for me, because I couldn't do that on my own, but that's how he's changed me. So anyway, that was my slavery behind me. And he's like, now is your choice. So you can go back to Egypt, which would have been staying at the house and going back into the ways of fear and isolation and, hunkering down and being scared. Or I can move forward. But of course, forward basically just looked like a big sea in front of me. He was like, this is your Red Sea moment. Because when the Israelites were standing there in front of the sea, basically what they were thinking to themselves is, there's nowhere to go. Like, where are we supposed to go? There's nowhere to go. And that was my exact thought process about leaving their house. Is I'm thinking, where am I supposed to go? Like, I don't even know where I'm supposed to go, because not only do I not have a place to live, but the world is shut down. Like, restaurants are closed, coffee shops are closed, everybody's hiding in their houses. Like, where am I supposed to go? But that was my choice. So I left. And like I said, I basically put this part of the story out on Instagram the other day, shared it. And when I left, I knew I was just going to do what I would normally do that day. So that was on Saturday. So I was like, well, I would normally go to the grocery store this morning and get a shake, like a protein shake. I had $4 to my name at the time, because again, part of this whole journey that he has me on. And I would take the dogs on a walk. So that's what I did. I went and I got a shake, and then I went and took the dogs on a walk. And then at that point was when it kind of started to hit me. And I admit I could feel the spiritual attack happening, because I started struggling and I started feeling what I imagined the Israelites felt when they wanted to go back to Egypt. I kept thinking, why don't I just go back to their house? Why don't I just go back to their house? Because, I have a bed there and I have like comfort and security or comfort and security. And, so I was kind of panicking, because this is another thing that I wrote down that I know you wanted me to share, is that what the enemy was trying to do in my mind in that moment was make me think of all the other times that I had been there, where on my nomadic journey, there had been times where I was just sitting in my car and I had nowhere to go and I didn't know where to go. And I would spend hours sitting there. And, there were even times at some points where I ended up sleeping in my car. So of course he's bringing all this back to mind and trying to taunt me with it. And I had to really like purposefully remind myself that that was a different season. And so we can't base God and the way he works and the way he moves. We can't base what we think about him all total based on a season we were in. So that was a season of testing, a season of preparation, a season of pruning and of refining that I was in before. So none of those things even applied to where I was now, but he was trying to taunt me with them. So I was getting a little impatient and starting to kind of freak out. And I had, texted a few people, few friends, just asking for prayer and encouragement. And one of my friends said something that really stood out, because again, the Lord had spoken to me through so many different stories about my journey overall. And David and Joseph were two of them. So my friend brings up to me, well, what happened with Joseph? Like, I can't remember. I'll have to go back and read it. And I said, well, he didn't have to do anything. He was waiting, and then they sent for him. Like, he had already, he had already helped them with their dream interpretations when he was in prison. And so he actually didn't do anything. He was just sitting there in prison, and the guy remembered him and came and or told Pharaoh, and then he sent for him. So then I'm realizing it as I'm answering her. Oh, and then I said, same thing with David. Like, they sent for him. They knew that he played beautiful music, and they thought that would calm the king. So they sent for him. And I was like, they just had to wait. And then she says to me, same thing at the Red Sea, the Israelites just had to wait. And she quoted Exodus, where it says, just wait and watch while the Lord fights for you, and basically just stay calm. So I knew in that moment that I was like, I just have to wait. I just have to be calm. So waiting spiritually, not necessarily like waiting physically, because really what occurred to me at that moment was I was like, well, I had some food and some drink in my car that I ironically wanted to give to a homeless person, which I know is funny, but I wanted to give it to a homeless person. And so I remembered that there was usually a man that stood up by the ramp on the highway. So I was like, well, while I'm waiting, I'm just going to at least go give him this food and drink that I have. So I drove up there, and he wasn't there, but I went ahead and I got on the highway because I thought, well, I'll go up to this other exit, and there's a Starbucks up there, and I'll just try sitting in their parking lot to use their Wi-Fi. So I go up to this other exit, I go over to the Starbucks, and I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I'm looking online. I connected to their Wi-Fi, and a person that I had been in contact with about something completely unrelated. It was like a nonprofit organization that I was going to do some stuff with. He had messaged me, the person from that organization had messaged me, and I'm not sure. I think he had seen my Instagram story. But anyway, he messaged me, and he said that he felt like God told him that they were to support me and they were to help me. So he wanted to send a donation. So as I'm just sitting there in this Starbucks parking lot, he sends this donation through. And immediately, I mean, when I say immediately, I mean like immediately, I knew that this was provision for me to get out of the car and go spend the night somewhere. And I have to tell you that I normally in the past would have questioned that a million times. First of all, I would have hesitated to receive the donation, but these are all lessons that God took me through. Like, let me clarify that when I'm sharing this with you, I'm not saying that like everybody's going to be able to just jump right to this. I'm sharing this to encourage you and to give you maybe like, you know, a just to give your faith a boost and encouragement, because I didn't just wake up and end up where I could like walk out the door trusting God. Like, he took me through a journey to get me here. So there were so many things along the way that I had to learn to be able to get to this point, to be able to react this way. And there was many, 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 many steps along the way of learning to trust him. And it's literally like the transformation. Well, the series was Crazy Faith, but like the baby faith thing about how like you take the baby faith steps and then those grow you to higher levels of faith. So it was lots and lots and lots of little things of trusting him for, like dog food and new face wash or moisturizer, and like trusting him for groceries, and just all these little things along the way, which then brought me to this place where I could trust him for big things like this. Um, and also another thing was really bringing me into an understanding of who he is, and really, really dealing with some old mindsets and some old baggage to bring me to a true understanding of who he actually is as our Father, how much he loves us, how much he wants to take care of us. Those things that foundation had to be laid first before I could do something crazy like this. But so anyway, one of the things in the past that I probably would have struggled with was receiving from people. And I did struggle with that in the past. And I'm guessing that probably for some of you, even when you listen to this story, or maybe even when you listen to my Tulsa story, you might have some of the same thoughts that I used to have, which is you get really uncomfortable, like, oh, well, really, she was just receiving from people. Like she wasn't receiving from God, like it was people that were giving her stuff. And shouldn't she be taking care of herself and not like just relying on people? And if you're having any of those thoughts, like I understand because that is where I came from. And God had to bring me to this new place, and this is going to be a huge part of my ministry moving forward. But basically, the short version is that we have to remember we are the hands and feet of Jesus. So he uses people, he uses his creation, he uses things in the world to bless us. So even like your job, you might think your job is the provision, but God's the source using the resource of your job. So he will use people, he will use whatever. And he has provided for me supernaturally in the past where literally it's just something that makes no sense. But he had to really work on me as far as receiving from people because I had a lot of baggage from my past about feeling guilty or feeling ashamed for that. So anyway, I had worked through all that. So I was able to receive this donation from this person. I was grateful. I believed that God really did tell him to help me because I knew God would go ahead of me and I knew he would prepare the way for me, prepare whatever that looked like, prepare people's hearts, prepare supernaturally, prepare whatever it was. Um, but I also in the past would have probably hesitated, like as soon as I saw the number of what his donation was, the amount, I would have fixated on that amount and I would have started in my head going, well, how should I use that? How should I break that down? How far can I make it stretch? And when I tell you I reacted differently this time, I reacted completely differently this time. So I just knew I had such a peace in my spirit that I was like, my Father just provided for me to get out of this car. And as you probably know, if you watched my Tulsa video, I had to learn to just trust him for each thing one at a time, one day at a time, each thing at a time, one meal to the next meal, to the bed that night, to the next meal, to the next meal, to the bed that night. And so I really couldn't think ahead. So he was teaching me to have that same mindset, but in my everyday life, in my life here, not just on a trip to Tulsa. So thinking like that, I did see the amount, but I did not fixate on the amount. I didn't even, I felt myself like maybe for a millisecond want to go there. And I was like, nope, I thank you, Abba Daddy, that you gave me money for a hotel. And what was interesting is I'm sitting in the Starbucks parking lot and there's literally a hotel right here, right next to me. And I just knew that it was like different than the past. I didn't have to drive around all these different places. I didn't have to like do all of this crazy confusion because God is not a God of confusion. It was like, here's your provision, go get a room. And so I literally just went right next door. I didn't even know if they took pets because, of course, I had my dogs with me and I didn't know how much it was going to cost or anything. But so I went in and wouldn't you know it, they take pets. Wouldn't you know it, it was a great price and I could afford it with the money he donated. And the blessings just kind of went on from there because they normally charge for 2 pet fees and they only charged me for 1. It was an excellent price because, of course, most hotels are pretty empty right now. And just they gave me free bottles of water at the desk and, it just kind of kept going and going. So I checked in. I was able to immediately like spread out and, you know, actually do the rest of my Bible study and get some work done. And the dogs were comfortable and they were safe and I was comfortable and I was safe. And so it was again just another example of how he loves us, how he cares for us, his provision. And I would have never in a million years seen any of this coming. But again, of course, like again, if you watch my Tulsa trip, that was just the beginning. So what ended up happening as well that same day on Saturday was I ended up, while I was sitting in the Starbucks parking lot, I randomly checked my ministry account because I have a separate account for the ministry than my personal one. And when I was talking to the other person from the nonprofit, when I was talking to him, out of habit, I guess, I just gave him my personal information for him to send the donation. And while I'm sitting there, though, I was like, oh, well, I can check my ministry account, and I forget what I was checking it for. I think I was just going to check and see like if there was a link that I could send him to directly do it. And so I opened my ministry account, and I have a pending deposit, but it was under a different name. It was under a name I've never heard of before in my life. And I was like, wait, what is this? And so I clicked on it, and there was actually a note there from a person I've never heard of in my life. And it was an extremely sweet note. I won't get into the specific details, but it was basically this person sharing with me how he had watched my Tulsa testimony video and how it had touched him deeply because of something personal in his life, and it had really encouraged him. So he had sent a donation through, and I didn't even know it because I guess I don't have my email notifications set up or something, but I didn't even know it was there. And wouldn't you know it, when I ended up looking at it, I don't remember if I noticed it right then. I think I actually noticed it much later, but the timestamp on this person's donation was literally like when I left that morning. So that whole time, I already had provision. That whole time, God had already made a way for me. He literally just needed me to go. He just needed me to leave. It was like the Israelites. They just needed to leave. They just needed to trust and go. And then when they got to the sea, God parted it. And who knew this whole time I already had provision from that morning, but I didn't realize because I hadn't checked it. So I was already able to check in, and then found that I had this donation through the ministry website. So I had to contact PayPal because it was saying it was pending. It was saying that they were holding it. And when I called them and talked to them about why they were holding it, it was like this weird glitchy kind of thing with how it got processed. Like it got processed like an eBay transaction instead of just a regular transaction. So they gave me these instructions that I had to then forward to this person. And I was like, okay, I guess I can do that. I'm like, I don't even know who this person is, but okay. So because that happened, I had to email this person. And I emailed him. I found the email in the transaction notes, and I emailed him and I told him what was happening and gave him the directions. And so because of that, that started a conversation between me and this person. And again, to make an analogy with my Tulsa video, if you remember my breakfast story, and when I was calling to get breakfast and like they wouldn't answer and they wouldn't answer, and it was turning into this big ordeal, and I said out loud, God isn't a God who like makes things difficult. God is not a God who ignores and forsakes and doesn't answer. So all I can think is this must be a setup. And then it turned out to be a setup because I got all that breakfast food because of all the trouble. It was the same kind of thing. So it ended up turning into such an ordeal to get this release, to get this payment released. But what was funny is that I was actually being like, oh, it's fine, no worries, I'm sure it'll get taken care of. And the person, who I will note is a member of Transformation Nation, because you guys are the best and you're awesome. But anyway, he was a member of Transformation Nation, and you know they can be fiery. And so he was like determined that this payment was going to get to me and the devil was not going to hold up his blessing. And so what ended up happening is that he decided he was just going to go around the whole problem and he was going to send it to me another way. So, I mean, after trying, I don't even know how many times to get this other one to work, he ends up sending it to me another way. And he says to me, this has just made me all the more resolute that I'm doing the right thing, and I'm going to bless you even more. And so whenever that other one comes through, just keep it. And I was like, are you sure I can't refund it to you? Are you sure I can't send it back to you? And he was like, no, you need to keep both of them. So he sends me the donation again, this other way. And literally this finally goes through right before service starts online on Sunday. And I received it. I thanked him. We like finished up our conversation, and I'm getting ready to watch the church service. and I get a notification from PayPal that the other one went through. So literally, I ended up with two. And as soon as that happened, the Holy Spirit was like, double blessing, said to me in my head, double blessing. This is the double blessing. So again, just like with my Tulsa trip, the Lord was just blowing my mind. Um, and I wasn't having to do anything. Again, like my trip, I wasn't having to do anything but be me. All I was doing was being me and sharing what parts of the journey I felt like I was supposed to share. And that's it. I didn't ask anybody for anything, which again might be something that might be ticking something in your head, because those were issues I had to deal with. Oh, well, should I not ask anybody for anything? Which that's not even true anyway. You should be able to ask for help. But I was just thinking to myself, I didn't even have to do anything. Like God just went ahead of me and he made the way. He had this man do this donation before I think I was just leaving the house. I don't know if he saw my Instagram story or not. I can't remember when I posted it, but it must have been either right before it or maybe right when I posted it. But anyway, so he made a way for all of that. And so I was able to also go to the store and get food for dinner that night, get food for breakfast and lunch the next day. I was able to um, turn my cell phone back on because my cell phone wasn't even on when I went out into the Red Sea, and just take care of, I mean, even like my website was due and I was even thinking, what am I going to do? Because like, I know my ministry website's got to be up and running because he's like talking to me every day about stuff he wants me to release. And so like, I got to fix that, and just, it was like everything and more that I needed provision for. And basically that was Sunday. So basically since then, he has multiplied and stretched that provision. And it's been crazy because I don't even know how it's happening, but like he stretched that provision so that every day when I get up, I'm able to extend my stay here like one more day. And I'm still living just day to day. I don't have an idea of like the big picture, but the reason I can be so completely like calm and peaceful and joyful in the midst of it is because I know he's got me. So, and he's been speaking to me constantly throughout this whole thing. So I know I'm right where I need to be. And I know the point is that he's leading me to the end position, the end game, which is the manifestation of what he's promised me. But this has been the transition. This has been the journey to it. And it requires huge steps of faith. It requires, stepping out and standing on nothing but his word. And I'm sharing again all of this because I want this to be encouraging, because again, I am like a normal, well, I'm not normal. I won't say I'm normal, but you know what I mean? Like I'm just like a regular person, and yet this is where God can bring you to when you let him take you on the journey with him. So he has completely transformed me, completely just changed me and changed my heart and grown my trust, grown my faith, um, and really gotten me to this point where I'm able to do this kind of thing. So I'm looking at my notes to make sure. Really at this point, I I know that he's moving big time around Passover and Easter, which is this week. Passover starts on Wednesday, Easter is on Sunday. Orthodox Easter is the following Sunday. And without, again, getting into any details in the other words, the prophetic words that I released, which again, I'll link down below, he talked a lot about right around Easter time and Passover, and just big things happening, we'll say. Big changes, big things happening with what you're seeing going on in the world right now. And then also, again, with like what Pastor Mike at Transformation was talking about this past Sunday, how this Easter is going to be the beginning of just a huge movement and a huge revival, and really what all of this kind of craziness and this chaos and this shaking that's been going on for the past month, what it's all been leading up to, because this has all just been a setup basically. I mean, it's been doing a lot of other things, but I'm not going to get into all that because again, you can read it. but that the timing is all leading up to Easter and Resurrection Sunday for a reason. So really, I'm kind of just, again, walking in faith and moving towards what's coming. So I will keep you guys posted for sure about all of that. And that's kind of that part of it. But I did also feel like there were just a couple other things that he wanted me to mention. And that is that one of the things that he had to take me through very, very recently was dealing with my conscience. And your conscience is not your conscious. Your conscience, of course, as you know, is the part of you that lets you know what you're doing right or wrong. So your conscience makes you feel good if you're doing what you think is good, and your conscience makes you feel guilty and feel bad if you're doing something that you think is wrong. So literally just probably about a month ago, it was again a setup for all of this. I did not know it at the time, but I mean, I can see the breadcrumbs so clearly now, but just again, probably about a month or so ago, he brought up this thing about conscience, and it was through a video that I was watching on YouTube. And this woman who is a prophet, she shared this thing about your conscience being healed, and it was perfectly timed because I knew there was something else that God was saying needed to be dealt with, and I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't that this woman said it. It was that while I'm watching the video, the Holy Spirit inside is going, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Pay attention. This is what you need to listen to. So basically what that was is that you can have gone through heart healing, which I did. I went through some deep heart healing with Jesus during my wilderness season. And so I was like, I know my heart's healed. And then transformation of my mind, like I know I've been through that. But your conscience is a whole separate thing. And there's like 32, I think, references to your conscience in the New Testament. So it's not a new agey weird thing. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. But having a clear conscience is in the Bible, like 30 sometimes. I want to say it's 32. Basically, all that means. So when I took this subject and went back and prayed and meditated on it with God, just between me and him, what the Holy Spirit was basically showing me is that your conscience has to be aligned with God. Your conscience can't be aligned with anything else, because if your conscience is aligned with something else, then it can give you incorrect information. So if it's aligned with someone else's rules, then you're going to feel bad when you violate those rules, but that might not mean that it's the same as God's rules. Does that make sense? I hope. So he actually dealt with this with me for a different reason, because I had been experiencing his favor on that Tulsa trip, and my flesh wanted to almost kind of reject it, because my flesh was like, like, why do I get to do this when like not everybody gets to do this? Like, shouldn't I have to do what everybody else does? And so my flesh was actually almost kind of like feeling guilty or wanting to resist his favor and his blessings. And he had to really take me through the conscience part, because he was like, no, your conscience is giving you false information. Your conscience is making you feel like you should feel guilty or ashamed for something that is actually not wrong. It's right. It's how I work. It's how I operate. It's how I give to my children. And so I had to clear my conscience, or let Jesus heal my conscience, by going back and letting him show me where that wounding happened, where that scarring of my conscience happened, where my conscience got misaligned. So that was kind of how it happened, but I could clearly see where it came into play with this, with all the virus stuff going on, because here he's telling me clearly not to change my life, not to give in to these false security measures, not to do all of this isolation and crazy hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, staying away from people, all these things. Like he told me, and again, there's more in the words about it, but he told me like, those are all false security measures. Those are all, things that are trying to make these people feel better, as opposed to just trusting that you're covered and just trusting in him. So that was obviously challenging because, again, the conscience would come in at that point and it would go, well, who am I supposed to listen to? Do I listen to God, or do I listen to what the man is telling me, what the news is telling me, what man is telling me, basically? And so that was difficult, but not as difficult as it would have been if he hadn't already worked on the conscience thing. So I felt like he wanted me to mention that just because I think that's going to be an important subject for those of us in the church moving forward, period, because that's only going to get worse. Like, as we move forward into the times that are coming and the things that are coming at this point, because hopefully you all know what point we're at, really, in this world. And so as we move forward, things are going to get worse in that area, where we're going to really see the separation start more and more and more. And again, we're supposed to be set apart. We're supposed to be different. So that's okay that it's going to get more and more and more, but it's going to be difficult because for those people that wanted to stay one foot in the world and one foot in the church, or they want to please the world, or they don't want the world to think they're weird, or they want to stay friends with the world, that's not going to be able to work anymore. You're literally going to have to choose, because this division is going to get more and more. And again, this literally is like stuff I've just been walking through. So I'm sharing this as wisdom that I have learned, and things I've gone through with the Lord, not as judgment or as like self-righteousness, because this is all stuff I've been walking through myself. But I felt like he wanted to share that. And then also the other thing is just, again, the reason why it's so important to spend that quality time with him, to be in your quiet place with him, to read the word, to literally spend time just meditating on the word and hearing from him personally, is because for times like this right now, if you only go by what you see, you're going to have the completely wrong picture. You're going to only be going by what you see in the natural. You're going to only be going by what you hear man telling you. And God can be doing something completely different with it. It has a completely different spiritual purpose. It has a completely different, way of walking through it, and what God's trying to do and what he wants to accomplish. But if you're not spending time with him personally, and you're not reading the word, you're not allowing the Holy Spirit to highlight the word to you and to give you this revelation and give you this wisdom, then you're only going to be going by what you see and what you hear. And that's going to be dangerous, not just right now, but again, moving forward. And, that doesn't only apply to the stuff with the virus, that applies even to like what I just had to do with leaving the house and what I had to do on the Tulsa trip. If I only went by what I saw, then I would have been out of luck, right? Because I would have been looking at my account and going, well, I have $4, and looking at my gas tank and going, well, I don't have any gas, and looking at the natural of like, I don't have anywhere to live. But I didn't look at those things. All I paid attention to was what God was telling me in my personal quiet time, explaining to me where I was actually at, explaining to me, okay, this is what's behind you, this is what's in front of you, this is what I need you to do, this is why I need you to do it, this is what you can depend on that I'm going to do for you. Like, these are all things that came from him directly, because I spent that time with him. So that's just kind of a reminder that I feel like he wanted me to say, because in these times, the most important thing you can have is spiritual eyes, spiritual vision, discernment, clarity, revelation, wisdom. Those are the most important things you can have right now, because you're going to need to understand what's actually happening and not just go by what is being said to you or shown to you. So I feel like that was kind of what he wanted me to share for right now. There's so much going on that I probably could do 20,000 videos. And I have a lot of other, not necessarily words, but kind of like words/teachings that I'm going to be releasing, just because he's given me so many that I want to start getting them out there. And I feel released to be able to do that now. So I will hopefully be releasing those soon, so make sure that you subscribe and you get notifications so you'll know when those come out. And I really just hope that this encouraged you. I hope that this was inspiring to you in some way, and I will definitely keep you guys posted as this continues and as we see how these next few days and week pan out. So I will talk to you soon, and I hope you guys are all doing well, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.